Yeah, anybody who does not want their face on the recording, please go ahead and stop sharing your face. All right, Fumbi, I guess we're ready to begin.
Can you see my screen, please?
You can see it. Do you want to share your video or?
Yeah, I was showing something. I'll just do that now. Again.
It's starting now.
Yep. There we go. We can see it.
All right. My name is Fumbi Fagade, and I'm going to just go straight on. I'm trying to see. It's a little bit slow. I don't know. I'm having some little technical issues with the system. That's why. Oh.
Did you want to present Fumbi, or are you just going to go off?
Sorry, it's coming up. It's coming up, I believe. Yeah. Right. Can you see? It's not showing. It's a little, there's a lag somewhat. So just please.
We can see the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, I can see my presentation here fully, but it's still,
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Okay, so I'll be talking about business agility. My name is Fumbi Fagade again, and so I'm just going to move on. I'm an experienced IS information systems manager, project manager, and I've been in the risk management department of the financial services industry. I've spent like 15 years, have accounting and information security audit background, and some of my certifications are here. So I'm going to go right to what we have for today, the agenda for today. We want to introduce ourselves again to what business agility is. And we're going to be talking about the business environment, thoughts on business leadership, and then we're going to review some of the organizations, that most of us know. And we want to see why some of them failed and why some of them succeeded. And we want to see how agile practices can actually help future businesses attain some form of excellence, as it were. And then we're going to conclude on that. So essentially, businesses are formed definitely by entrepreneurs, and mostly exist to make profit. Yes, because we have non-profit organizations as well. And it's important for us to, well, appreciate the fact that leadership is vital to survival. John Maxwell says everything rises and falls on leadership. That's just an intro on businesses. Now, talking about agility, we want to see the ability for this organization to respond quickly. So agility is all about, the speed with which we do things. And it has to do with nimbleness, has to do with being quick and light in movement. So I'm not going to go, so let's look at the typical business. The typical business is not the old, it can't function using the old strategies that probably businesses had. We used to have a lot of bureaucracy in organizations. Those things just need to change. Business as usual is over. So why is this so? If we look at what we are seeing on our screen, we see this business and we see that there are a lot of forces that are beyond the business, the control of the business. And over time, we also know that there are a lot of uncertainties. We cannot clearly tell what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows. So essentially, businesses have to be able to manage uncertainties, complexities that they face along the line. And the speed of awareness is key, because many businesses fail because they don't even know that they are failing already. So I just had this. It says thoughts on business leaders. If we had two organizations, and the business leader is like the big cat lion, or the big tiger, so who is likely going to be the more agile leader? Who is going to win in a fight? Some of the, I've tried to research this as well. It tells me that the lion may not necessarily be the, real victor at the end of the day. Why? Because the tiger is much more agile, than the lion. So we can do a lot of research on that as well. But you may just put in your thoughts in the chat. Which one is going to be the more agile leader? Having the traits of either the lion or the tiger. All right. So looking at some of the organizations that we can see here, I'm sure a lot of things will tell us that many of these organizations have either failed or they have been suboptimally managed. For example, looking at a Yahoo, I understand that Yahoo a few years ago had the opportunity to buy up Google and Facebook, but they decided that they were too big. I mean, they were a lot better than this other organizations. That's Google and Facebook. But we know where we are today. So there are a lot of other organizations like that. I'm just going to skip that because I believe we are all aware of quite a number of them. All right. So I'm going to just minimize this. Okay. So we see Motorola. We have BlackBerry. We have General Motors. We have Panasonic, and all that. So all these actually had the privilege to lead in the market. They were actually market leaders at a point in time, but because they were not agile enough for the uncertainties that they faced in the environment, they were displaced in the market, or some of them actually went extinct. Now let's look at these organizations. If you look at a Microsoft, I used to remember when we had Windows 1, 2, 3, Microsoft started gradually, and then because they kept improving. So there's a continuous improvement, strategy that many of these organizations have, and that's why they've been able to achieve a lot of success. Apple, but quite a number of other all these organizations that we have here. I don't intend to go into every one of them. We have Tesla, and quite a number. Facebook, like I said earlier, Salesforce, and all that. These are very successful organizations. I actually have Pfizer and Moderna and all this other stuff there because they actually came, they responded quickly to the need of the global world. I mean, the world when we had this pandemic issue last year. Still with us, but they're still responding. So these are organizations that were able to respond quickly to the needs of their customers, and so I'm going to just go ahead and ask ourselves, why do businesses fail? I looked at the statistics from the US Bureau of Labor. It says by the 10th year, if we have 100 businesses start up today, in year 10, by year 10, 67 of them would have, failed. I mean, this is huge, and so looking at why do they fail? Why do they fail? Many leaders are not aware of the declining status on it. It's too late. Many of them are very slow at responding to changes in market and customers' needs. There's an absence of continuous learning. These are all some of the things. And we remember in those days when we used to have all these long meetings that are really not effective. That's really what Agile practices has been able to actually take out of the business world and come up with more productive meetings, as it were. And then operating in silos, lack effective collaboration, and flexibility in decision making. Yeah, until this boss is there, nothing moves. So all those things need to change. So we're looking at Agile practices for success. This essentially revolves around the Agile Manifesto as well. It's important for the business to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We need to focus on high interaction with customers. We need to be able to change course based on customer feedback and competition. We need to be able to make a little progress each day. We don't have to do like a project and say, well, okay, it's a 3-year project and we cannot deliver until after 3 years. We can do that with Agile. You can give yourself 2 weeks, you can give yourself 4 weeks, but just make sure you're doing that. A little progress each day adds up to big results, says Satya Nani. So, and then the third thing is customer collaboration must be valued over contract negotiation. We need to stop working in silos. We need to develop the teams, and then make sure that they can actually harness the resources and the knowledge base to get the optimal value for the company. And then we need to value responding to change over following a plan. We all know that the only constant thing that we have in life is change, okay? Right. All right. So I'm going to go on to what business agility looks like. What business agility looks like. It says it encourages innovation and flexibility, and quite a number of things. Because of time, I may not go into everything, but this is what it looks like. And customer connection, the key things, just to summarize that, is customer connection. Businesses must be very close to the customer, their needs, sometimes even their wants, depending on where you want to have your niche in the market. We must be able to have competitive advantage over your peers in the industry. Essentially, it's an ability to predict, prepare, and to pivot. So that's what business agility. In other words, you are very quick at responding to changes in the environment. Now, adopting Agile. Entrepreneurship is not a character, it's a behavior pattern. That's what Peter Drucker, who is one of the management gurus. He says, entrepreneurship is not a character, it's a behavior pattern. Okay, so for the business to adopt Agile, it must, flow through. The awareness must be there through all the strata of the business. So starting from the strategic leadership, they must be agile. The awareness must be there, and the data-driven decision making must be there. And that's where the artificial intelligence tool will help. Even the data that the business has must be enhanced, to actually take decisions that help for the future. The organization must have agile mindset. We must have a flattening of the hierarchy. In other words, we don't have to go through this before a transaction is effected. Okay, and then we have the operational agility, has to do with speed and quality, visibility and flexibility. I have quite a number of these as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, I'm going to conclude by saying business agility is no longer an option. It is a vital element of any successful business. So businesses have, I have it as 3 choices or 2. You may say you either stay agile or you fail or die. So it's either of probably 3. Let's make it 3 because we have some that almost got extinct, but we're able to be revived, but they lost the leadership in the industry. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, what I have for us. Thanks for listening, everyone. So if we have any question, I guess, we have a lot of resources here that we can tap into. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks. We have 2 minutes left for questions.
I have a question. It was
More of a comment. I noticed that on the list of failed company, there was Enron. I don't think Enron failed because it was not agile or it was not paying attention to the market. The leadership was stealing from it, bankrupting it. So I'm not sure how agile remedies that sort of behavior. Another point is that GM has shrunk in terms of market share. That's true. But I think the structure of the market it was working in seemed to be, I'm not quite sure how to say this, changing in such a way that nobody could keep up with it, right? The relationship between managing its product stream and its the ability to compete with other companies on the global market, you might say. I think GM is actually doing okay now, isn't it?
Yeah, really, the list is not saying that some of them actually failed outright. What we were saying, what I was trying to bring up in that presentation is the fact that they could have done a lot better if they, you see, it's the speed with which they do things. So take, for instance, Enron. There's no transparency, there's no visibility of what they're doing. So for instance, if everything is being tracked, I quite appreciate what you were saying, but if everything is tracked, monitoring is very key. Okay, so and then the same thing with General Motors. The speed wasn't there. Okay, the speed, and it took them a long time to actually get that. Same, IBM was there as well. IBM is good, it's good now, but you said the speed was not there. They were really, really ahead before, but it's not the same thing now, right? That's just the idea. It's not that all of them are actually off, but for me, Agile has to do with transparency, has to do with tracking, and where you were and what, so it's a little progress every day. In terms of accountability as well, it's important, so thank you.
So maybe what we could do is reserve additional time if people still have questions after all the speakers are over. If that works. Chris, I think you're next, correct?
I think so.
Are we all set? Tom, you're still good with recording?
Yep, we're all good.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, hi everyone. The discussion I wanted to have today, or the presentation I wanted to share with you, is talking about the culture of high-performing teams. And I'm going to say, in essence, what we're talking about is many of the things that Funby just was talking about in terms of values and agile principles. But it's going to be focused specifically, as it's saying here, on teams. I consider the values and principles, mindsets, really to be part of the culture. And if we think about Agile, Agile really is striving towards, two basic goals, at least I'll say the vanilla flavored Agile. And that is the frequent delivery of valuable quality services, products, softwares to our customers. And also sort of implicitly the development of self-organizing and continuously improving teams as actually an organizational capability. A lot of times we have our focus on just delivering completely these wonderful things. And although we're doing things like retros and we're thinking about way teams interact, we may not be looking at them directly as actually developing a capability in itself. And maybe we are. But, in terms of delivery versus capability, team capability, there's any number of Agile methods, frameworks that help us really do that work and realize, really fantastic, delivery capability. And I won't go through the list. But the Agile Manifesto also mentions that Agile is about individuals and interactions, going to its first value. And then also, kind of again implicitly, it's also about new ways of thinking, thinking about how we survive in the marketplace and how we should and how we should be as opposed to how we should do while we're doing those practices. So values are more about being, mindsets are more about being, and that's what I'm really trying to get at here. So it's really about developing a teaming capability in terms of moving towards high performance. But simply knowing about or talking about these values or putting them on walls, you typically go into a corporation and their values are plastered all over their walls. And that's usually not quite enough to instill what those values are and what you're doing every day. It's really that, these values and mindsets need to be intentionally cultivated to be a natural part of the team interactions. And I'm bringing out the fact that I'm talking about interactions here. So values and mindsets as part of your interactions together as a team. So the question is, what kind of values should we be using? And I think that most of the mainstream Agile methods have also additional sets of values that you can see here that, really help us give some hints. These are their values. These are Scrum, XP, and Kanban. And there's a lot of overlap. You see respects here a lot, collaboration, feedback, simplicity, focus, commitment, openness. There's a common theme here that I think that they're all kind of playing off of. So the question is really, so how do we start? And again, let's go back to what we were just talking about. Maybe you could put these values and interactions, right on the wall. Or review the value set maybe every retro and decide that you might do some of these things or think about some of these things or remind yourself about some of these things. Or maybe you could describe what your target team environment and interaction style might be as a team. So a lot of times we talk about all the things that we do and how we're not going to be late to meetings and that they're going to start in certain times and that we have definitions of done and ready. But we don't talk about the environment and the mood and the interaction style that we want to bring to those discussions and to that work a lot. But you do see them also as part of norms and working agreements. And you can put them in there. Or maybe what you can do is you can look at issues in your team dynamics, and these things emerge as far as they start happening. As a coach, I sort of run into the 2 or 3 a month. Individuals or groups of individuals that are starting to feel a little intense. And they're feeling dysfunction, right? And what I kind of really want to bring home here is nothing really encourages you quite the same amount of attention as looking at these specific team dynamics. They're on the table. They're, the transparency in Agile really puts it out there and people start raising them as things. And so what does that mean, or what is missing in terms of making that, functional again? So let's really call them what they are. So the things that are arising are problems or dysfunctions. And people a lot of times are, stigmatized by using the word problems or dysfunctions. But like I said, they show us places to go and things that we can improve on. They're conspicuous, and then we respond and we adapt to that change. A very famous gentleman, Taiichi Ohno, who is one of the fathers of lean manufacturing, he said, having no problems is really the biggest problem of all. So we shouldn't really be concerned or afraid about problems. We should look at them and see what we want to do about them. So the real thing I'm trying to talk about is this book that I use a lot, and this framework, I'll call it. And it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is written by Patrick Lencioni. And he actually studied executive teams for many, many years. And I think what's interesting about this is what he came up with in terms of statements about teams is really applicable to any team. And so he observed that teams they tend to have certain dysfunctions. They tend to have an absence of trust at some point. That they also have a tendency to fear conflict and a lack of commitment towards what they're doing or the decisions they're making, a general tendency to avoid accountability, and then ultimately they don't really attend to their results. So they're not focused. This is what you often see. So it's a pyramid, and much like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you really need this foundational layer and every succeeding one to be able to move up to the focus on really attending to results. But the real question is, so what do you do about it? So yeah, it's nice you have these dysfunctions. So kind of the inverse of that is that you like teams to start building trust and mastering conflict, achieving their commitments. And commitments a big thing we talk about in terms of planning, but commitments to each other in terms of what anything that you're talking about in a team, and that you hold each other accountable and focus on collective results. So I'm going to go through each of these briefly. So building trust, teams need to create an environment of trust and safety and even vulnerability as a sense of that's the prerequisite environment that you'd like to see in teams. And if you're not seeing that, then this is something to respond to. And if you don't have that trust, or if you do have that trust, that gives them the platform to engage in candid conversations, right? So team members need to find ways to engage, actively contribute. You've probably heard of the silent members, or the people that aren't aren't speaking much sometimes. So the question is why, and the safe environment is kind of a prerequisite. And really, to engage in the activity, you really have to be respectful to have these courageous conversations. And you also need to master conflict. So candid conversations very often involve conflict and differing opinions, but that's really okay, again, once you feel safe, and again, that your comments are respectful. And being candid and mastering the conflict allows a team to achieve commitment quickly and confident, because they're used to engaging with each other in a very direct and honest and candid way and respectful way. And so how do you actually, achieve commitment? And one of the things you hear a lot is that everybody should be heard, that you should have the conversations for understanding, and that you make sure any plan or decision is actually clear. And rather than going for a consensus necessarily, he found that you go for a different approach, which is an agreement on buy-in rather than complete agreement among the team members. And that, leads us to the ability to, feeling that you can be accountable, that you're moving quickly, that you're, again, your commitments are clear, and then everybody kind of feels they're on the same page and they can be accountable, for the work, the planning, the story writing, coordination, communication. So we should, as a thing to look at, as a way to notice whether this is happening or not, it's really not just about individual accountability. Again, in the team context, it's really holding each other accountable. And so what that really means is that we really help, and we reach out and help, like we cultivate many times, and we encourage each other to get things done, again, many times together as teams mature even more. And again, with this accountability, now we have the ability to open it up and really fully attend to what we're doing and the things that we're working on, so we can get some really great results. Because thinking in terms of the collective results is what it really takes to deliver great value to customers. And again, back to the Agile approach, frequently, deliberately with quality. And this really enables us to celebrate, the amazing and sustainable team results that come out of creating an interaction style and a culture that, had the characteristics that I just talked about. So I guess going back to the first slide, first I thought, well, high performing planes, that's cool. It's a great picture. And actually, as I looked at it more, it's like, what does this team need to have to be able to really pull that off? I don't know if you've ever flown a plane, but, flying that close, that fast is not a simple deal. But I'm guessing there's a lot of trust, and I'm guessing there's a lot of very candid conversations going on as these activities are or as these performances are rolling out. I'm pretty sure they're all committed to doing this, and they're certainly very accountable. And they certainly have, focused on the results, which is, flying together at very close quarters. So that's what I mean by, high performing teams and the characteristics that they have, and the things that you look for that are missing when you're looking at team environments and the dysfunctions or the issues and problems that pop up. And that's it. That's who I am. I'm a coach, a business agility coach and enterprise agile coach. And that's just where I hang my hat sometimes.
We have
there's resources, and I'll be sharing this deck so that you can access it. It's a little big, but you should be able to pull it down. These are really great resources to look at, including things about values and mindsets, Scrum values. This is a really great article about Scrum values. But here are the two books. He has a workbook that talks about overcoming this. These are other things that I've used in the way that I'm thinking about what's going on in teams. It's a great filter, and I appreciate the time being able to share this with you.
How much time do we have left, Marla?
2.5 minutes for questions.
Okay. What's the question?
So I can go. This is Puneet. Thanks for sharing about the 5 dysfunctions of the team. It's one of my favorite books too. I totally relate to the story there where the CTO is just looking at his laptop and checking the email while they go on their offsite. We've tried 5 dysfunctions of the team within my organization. As whenever we build a new team, we always go through the pyramid of the pyramid, as he calls it. Where I found it a little difficult in practical life is really building that trust and getting people to share. I was just wondering if you had any experiences or any tricks which would, fasten that process, or because I'm usually working with the development teams, deep introverts, a lot of ego, and that's where the trust kind of becomes difficult.
I would say generally my experience around the safety and the trust area, vulnerability is, at least at the beginning, is just getting them to connect, forming the relationship, just like we had at the beginning of this, the lightning talk or the session. And I think with time, that familiarity, kind of seeps into the way that they interact. I think that's one thing. So relationships are everything. In many respects, the key to success. And along with that, I think the other thing that is really useful in terms of encouraging trust and safety is to really work through those working agreements and try to really cultivate them and make them, help direct you towards where you want to go in terms of things like trust. And maybe that's what you work on specifically in your working agreements or norms. And also talking about the tone, right? So it's not just about things we do, it's about the tone that you want to establish. Not talking over each other is pretty simple, but how do you want to engage with each other? How do you want to speak with each other? And so once people understand kind of those, I'll say, rules or understandings or agreements, I think that sets it up, trust starts emerging more.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's cool you're using it. You're using it. Must be out of time.
So I think what we're going to do is why don't we take a bit of a 5-minute break, you know, to get your biological or whatever you need in. And what we'll
We're back on recording.
okay, there we go.
All right, let me share.
No, your convenience.
All right, can you see the screen?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you to think about a situation where you would like to influence change. It could be at work or personal, maybe something that you have been trying to influence for a while. And you don't need to tell me, this is for you. We're going to revisit that situation at the end. Just take note about that situation for now. It could be about convincing about someone to attend team events, or it could be convincing someone to get vaccinated, any type of influence. So part of being a coach, a Scrum Master, or to work in an Agile team is to affect others. And we are working in a collaborative environment. So we are expected to collaborate, and part of collaboration is to express our ideas. And of course, if you are a coach, it's obvious you're hired to bring change to the organization. And the way you change an organization is by changing people who work in that organization. So let's take, for example, that you want to convince someone to get vaccinated or not. What you normally do, what you normally see, we have seen in social media in the last few months, people dumping a lot of information about vaccines. This is one of our first instincts, is to provide information about the change. But this doesn't work. Information by itself doesn't work. Reasoning leads to conclusions, not actions. Emotion leads to action, sometimes a bad action. So we need both. We need information, we need emotion. So in this session, I'm gonna present how we can become better at influencing others by understanding the mind and brains of those around you. And of course, this is a very, very broad topic. There are thousands of research papers on how the brain works. I'm going to give you some very high pointers. And at the end, I'm going to show you one approach, what we can do. I want it to be practical and useful for you. So the first thing we need to know is that, according to Michael Steiner, a frequent keynote speaker and bestseller coach, there are two types of change, what he calls easy change and hard change. Easy change can take a lot of effort, but it's change that you can accomplish by learning something, maybe practicing, and then you do it. For example, I didn't know how to use Jira for my roadmaps. I spoke with other coaches about that. I read about the topic, and then I was able to do it. Hard change, on the other hand, you cannot accomplish it by learning. No matter how many books you read, I'm not going to be able to lose weight, for example. I know that I didn't gain this figure by eating lettuce. I know it was a cake. So this is what hard change. The difference between hard change and easy change is not on the type of change. I have some neighbors that are Olympic athletes, And maybe for them, it's very easy to keep their weight. I see them running every morning. But maybe for them, using Jira could be a hard change. So easy or hard, it depends on us, on how we see the world, our perception about the world, our knowledge, our how our brains are wired. Unfortunately, our brains are wired to resist change. Our brains evolved for survival, and there are several structures in our brain that are actually designed to protect us from change. Because historically, change was risky. The first person who tried something to eat took a risk. They didn't know it was poisonous. So change was risky. Now, Michael von Steiner also talks about trust and some of the brain science related to trust. He says that according to research, our brains is scanning 5 times every second, asking a question: is it safe here or is it dangerous? And the factors that the brain considers to answer that question are these 4. He calls it the Theta factors. And tribe, are you with me or against me? Are we playing on the same team or you're playing for the opposite team? Expectation, do I know what's going to happen? Do I know what I expect from my team members? Rank is, do I feel more or less important than you? It's not about company hierarchies. The CEO, of course, gets a better salary, but if he's asking me for advice on which laptop to buy, well, at that time, for the brain perspective, I'm providing advice. I'm more important than the CEO from the brain perspective. So, of course, in a Scrum team, we all want to be equal. We may bring different experiences, different skills, but we are all developers according to the Scrum framework. And the last is the sense of autonomy. Do I have a choice? Am I here against my will? So if we are being micromanaged, for example, that will have an impact on our Theta factor. That will be perceived as an attack for our brains. We lose autonomy. The higher our Theta factor or Theta quotient, which is the combined result of these 4 factors, the more engaged we are going to be. And by engaged, I mean using the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that guides executive functions. So if the Theta quotient is high, we can see and manage ambiguity. We assume positive intent. If the quotient is low, the amygdala is engaged, and the amygdala is linked to several chemicals in our brain, in our body that can highlight emotions. Is associated to fear and anxiety. Fight or flight response, and even freeze. So knowing all of this, what can we do? Of course, there are different approaches. I'm going to present you what the recommendation from Tali Sharot, research scientist associated with Harvard and the London School of Economics. So she said that the first thing we need to do is to establish common ground. We cannot even talk about change if we are seeing the world from different perspectives. And we all see the world according to who we are, not how the world is. So we need to establish common ground. In the case of vaccines, yeah, maybe we all agree that we want to go back to the normalcy. We don't want to wear those masks anymore. In agility, we may agree that we want to deliver value early. And the second strategy, highlight the opportunity for progress. So the brain doesn't even register negative information. If it is a paper or study that doesn't fit with what we already think, we discard it. So we want to highlight the positive about moving in this change. We want to identify immediate rewards. So we cannot wait for 6 months to see a reward. And by reward, from a brain perspective, could be just a praise. Praise just lights part of the same part of the brain that are lighted when you get news that you won the lottery, and will not cost you a dime. So social incentives are powerful, and this works in an unconscious way. We all unconsciously want to fit. So if we see everybody moving in one direction, maybe they have information that we don't have. That's how the market bubbles are produced. And we can use it in our advantage as well, by promoting things that other people are doing in the organization. How many other companies are already working with agile practices? That's very contagious. We need to expand the agency to provide the tools and support that they need to effect that change, but also give the sense of control. Again, the Terra factors, the A was for autonomy. So a perception of reduced autonomy can generate a threat response. It will produce stress. And the last is consider mental states. Sometimes there is nothing we can do if the person is under heavy stress. One thing we can do is to create anticipatory events. So anticipation can be perceived as an immediate reward. For example, talk about the change that is coming. So going back to the initial question, the situation where you want to influence change. Now that you know something that are not working because of the way our brains are wired, what would you do differently to influence that change? How much time do I have?
Time's up.
All right.
2.5 minutes for questions.
So here I summarize thousands of papers in a few slides in 10 minutes. So please hit me with your questions.
Yeah, so how does ease play into this, right? So we talked about the various immediate rewards, social incentives, expanding agency, and giving sense of control. I'm thinking about how making things easy for people also influences change. So does that play into this as well?
Yes, but from a brain perspective, no matter how easy you make it, for example, how easy you make it to get your vaccine,
right?
If you are wired to reject science, you're not going to follow the route.
Got it. Who else has questions? All right.
Developing team, right? Developing team, and everybody has high ego and so on and so forth. And advice at that point was, make them connect, establish connection, go from there. How would you apply? These, 6 ideas, right? To, I guess, the same scenario.
Yeah, so we need to gain their trust. So you can't influence change if the person does not trust you. If you are in a higher position, maybe you can force it. But as soon as you move and you start looking at another side, the change will reverse. So you cannot force that permanent change. So trust, Tom mentioned about the trust and Patrick Lencioni approach. And the impact that trust is the basis of the pyramid. Now, trust is also linked to the Theta factors. They will trust you if you are on their team. They need to know that you have their back. We need to establish common ground. And to do this, you need to listen to the other person. And deeply listening to the other person also helps with trust, with empathy. Then you can move, but highlighting the opportunity, what's in it for them. So, the reason why nobody reads the warning, the emergency procedures in an airplane is that we don't even want to know. We want to focus on the positive. The carrot and stick, the stick doesn't really work. The rewards, the carrot works. Praise, running small experiments, short feedback loops that are successful. Even learning for the brain perspective increases the Theta ranking, acquiring seniority, positive feedback. Other questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask,
Time
okay.
time is up.
Yeah.
Okay. So here you have my contact information. You can write to me if you have other questions later. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So next up, we have Andrea. Are you ready, Andrea?
Yes, I am. Are you seeing my screen?
I am. Tom, are we still good with the recording?
Yep, we are still recording.
Awesome. Okay. At your convenience, Andrea.
Oops. So hi, everyone. As Agile enthusiasts, you surely know already a lot about product owners, at least in theory. So I have been working as a product owner for 5+ years now, and recently I attended a training. So it's a good time for me to reflect on my experience so far and show you the real life of a product owner as I live it every day. So I identified 3 areas. First is creating the product backlog, then refining the backlog and being part of the team. So first, the product owner does the product definition, and it means that I have some time to explain a new feature to a team. It encompasses in my company a document we call feature description, and I realized pretty quickly that no one really wants to read documentation, so I try not to make it too long or too complex. If somebody asks a question and the answer is in the document, but you have to read it twice to understand, I reorganize the section so that it's an easier read. Also, we are always doing something. It's really hard to value the task of reviewing, and it takes time. So I realize that we need to give more recognition to people who spend time reviewing documents, because it's also very important. there is a learning curve during backlog to learn a new feature or to do backlog review. If we don't do it upfront, we will do it during sprint, and then it's annoying because the extra time we need to learn generally will push the delivery away. So there is really a benefit in taking time and investing in understanding the backlog. Also, there is a limit about a written word and what they can describe. I'm always surprised to see how the same sentence can be interpreted different way by the author and readers or developer or tester, depending on which background they bring. And also, it helps to discuss with people, and it helps to explain where, what the scope of the feature is and what the background is. And sometimes describing everything by written in writing is very long, so it's nice and useful to be speaking to people and make sure that we are all agreeing. I mean, we can exchange graphs, call flows, everything can help. I also realize that user stories or feature description do not need to be perfect. We are agile. It means that we want to focus on working software or working product. So we need to identify early what is meaningful and discover or take decision as we go along to make the product done. I have seen product team delivering a good outcome or outcome when the input was completely non-existent. You probably know the absent product owner or somebody who just dumped something on the team's lap and say, see you in 1 month, we'll see what you do. So for the better or the worse, an agile team is able to create output with whatever they are given to work from. So that's a main role of my main characteristic of my role is really to foster the common understanding on the product. Then there is backlog refinement. The feature I'm working on are very big. They don't fit into 1 or 2 sprints. And even so, when we slice the feature, we need to come up with tasks that last 1 or 2 days. And I've seen a lot of resistance to create those smaller tasks. I think that some team members believe that it's micromanagement and they don't see the use for it. Personally, I like to do that even for my work because it helps me identify what I can do in 1 day, and it helps me if I send, I don't check in code, but I certainly can send a status or update a task every day so that if other people want to know what I'm doing, they can access the information. They don't have to wait for me and ask me. So for me, it's a very important aspect of accountability. We were talking that into the time dynamic a little earlier. I also realize that teams and team members have tasks they prefer to do. Generally, new feature, I have a team member who likes to do the work on the unit test framework. So I know that new feature and unit tests are well covered. It's more a struggle to get log and events that make sense for non-product experts. And you probably had the experience of looking at documentation or error message, and they make perfect sense when you are working on the feature and everything is fresh. But if you come back later, 3 months later, you really wonder what happened. So I see somebody speaking. Any question? Okay, I'll move ahead. And last, there is a technical debt. I sometimes feel that for every item we close, there are 2 new that are open. And it's a fine line to draw, to check what is a bug and what is a new feature. A new feature can be done later. A bug has to be fixed sooner. So it's all about setting priorities for the product and agreeing on priorities as a team. So as a product owner, I feel that I'm a part of the Scrum team. I make a point in attending the daily Scrum. So this helps address technical questions when they arise because I'm here and I can answer questions. For example, we had a product that had some configuration parameter that can apply per connection or per one time for the whole product. For a simplification point of view, those parameters had to apply per the product, we had to discuss the point during the Scrum team, and so that everyone understood why you were doing implementing this way and the benefit of doing so. So it helps keep everybody on the same page from a product point of view. Also, even if I'm not even being asked questions, I can identify assumptions. When people speak, it's easier for me to understand, to check if they are deviating from what I was expecting from the product to do. For example, I have a product that needs to store data in the database, but the data was not sanitized. And when we do unit tests, we can have the nice and clean data that we were expecting, but in a live site, that may not happen. So hearing what was going on, I could jump in and ask that we create a new task to just sanitize the data before storing it. So a lot of things happen during daily Scrum. It's a short meeting, but it's critical for me to be there. Another thing is to attending demos. I love demos. I'm always pushing for it. I like to see the product in action. During a demo, I saw the product routing messages, and we were looking at message dump. And that's where I realized that we had a hole in the product because we were missing a parameter. So it was not the exact topic of the feature, but at least it was a good opportunity to understand the product and what it does. And I can also see dependencies. Our product uses a platform, for example, and during a demo, I realized that the tester had to do a manual update because the test platform was not resolving IP address as it should do. So this was completely unexpected to me, and I have to make sure that that the tester has the ability to test in a deployment-like environment. So participating to all those Agile events allows me to know the good, the bad, and the ugly in the product. Personally, I find that status meetings sometimes are just too positive. We just put our best foot forward, and we forget to, or we don't want to mention what is not working that great. So to summarize it up, here's what I do really, how I see my work every day. Being a product owner brings a unique expertise to the team. I don't have to code. I don't have a test schedule or test deadline to hold, so I am a different sounding board for the team. It is a balancing act to be the product owner and not a bottleneck. So I have to know when to step in and be the last person to take a decision, or when I can collaborate and delegate to the team. It is very important for me to inspect, adapt, and improve for the team and for myself. So I hope that by sharing my experience, you can compare it to what happens in your environment, and that it will help you progress on your Agile journey. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any question?
Yes, I'm curious. Did you work as a Scrum Master before, or you always were a product owner?
I always was a product owner. I am also a certified Scrum Master, and I'm very interested by the dynamic. I think that both roles have a little bit of coaching or negotiation. I work very closely with the product master as well, the Scrum Master as well.
So Andrea, you talked a little bit about tasking and people pushing back on that. What types of things have you tried to kind of encourage team members to task out their stories?
You mean the size of the task?
Yeah, well, you talked about the size, and then you talked about tasking, and then because you kind of alluded to that was micromanagement, or some people think it's micromanagement.
Oh,
right?
yes, because the team is self-organizing, and you can see who takes what kind of task. So I can see that even in theory, the team should be able to take, or any team member should be able to take any task. You can see that some type of tasks go more too often to one person to the other. It's not my call to make. I can observe and make comment or suggest, explain what I see to the team. So that's you can make comment, but not say you do this task or do that task. Yeah.
Mhm. So you bring it up like in a retrospective or something, or I guess, what have you tried?
Yes, I try to bring it up during retrospective, and I guess it's where it's where it's important to have trust and make sure that people are open to face criticism. I feel that sometimes it's very tricky to make any comment, or you have to make sure that it will be well received or received in the right mindset, I would say. I think I get some relief when I suggest when a task is too big and at the end of the sprint it's not done. I say, okay, what is really done what is ready to be demonstrated, and we close the task. We make a smaller task, and whatever is not done, we push it to next sprint. So for me, it's a win-win because we learn to split into smaller increments. There is a task that we can complete during the sprint, and we have a smaller task next sprint instead of having a big item that we keep going, that keep to be pushed sprint after sprint.
Did you have a question, Asha?
Yes, I was just thinking about the same thing, like regarding the task. So I agree with you regarding task putting onto the story level. So that definitely helps to understand what's been completed and what's still not going to be made into the current sprint, so you can definitely complete in the next sprint. That could be a phase we come across. But the challenge what I am seeing is when we start adding like task, I have seen my Scrum Master is just evaluating the story points based on the task. And that was really weird because it was hard for me to explain him each and every task. And he was just thinking that if I don't have a list of like 10 tasks, then the story is not like of a 3 points or 5 points. So that was a really unusual situation. And it was hard for me to explain him what is there, like why I have so limited tasks or why I have too many tasks. So he thinks like if I have a 10 tasks, then I can give you 5 points. And if he thinks like it's just 3 tasks, it's just 3 points. So I'm like wondering, like, task is not what should estimate the point. Task is just to track the progress, what you are doing and where you are standing, or each team member come to know what you are doing and where the things are. That's what I also was thinking about it. So that's only 2 points from me.
Yeah, that's it's very tempting to find an quote easy way to calculate the effort of the work to be done. But yes, it's one task equals so many points is not the way to go. And then one example for us is capacity testing. It's just 2 words, but it's a rabbit hole.
Right.
Yeah, I had a quick question if this is a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, love hearing your perspective as a product owner. So thank you for sharing that. The question I had is for the sprint demo or sprint review. Do you ever invite other colleagues of yours in the business? I'm kind of assuming you're in the business. And do you ever invite them in, even though they may not be engaged with the team, just to kind of get another perspective and possibly to break some of the groupthink that might happen amongst the team?
So in my company, we have a demo, a product line demo every 2 weeks, where we can demonstrate what the product does to other teams in the division. Because we have a product line composed of like 10, 15 products, so we have a forum to show what we do and exchange ideas or reuse whatever people do.
And as part of that, you would take your team's work perhaps for that sprint or a past sprint and demonstrate that as well?
Yes, so we try to alternate. We have 1 demo a week, actually. The end of sprint demo where we can go in depth, and we try to size it to a higher level for what we share with the other teams.
Okay. Has that been beneficial, getting those other perspectives?
I I think so, because it's good to know what other teams do. I'll admit that it's always the same team that are demonstrating. It really depends on the Scrum Master to motivate people to demonstrate.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I do with my teams is I try to encourage that because it helps the product owner to learn more about the backlog. They may get some new ideas to put in there, or maybe some refinements or some feedback saying, oh, this thing we implemented, it doesn't quite hit the mark. And getting those other opinions and viewpoints can actually benefit the product owner a lot. And I was just wondering if that matches your experience or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the time is up, so I will have to stop the conversation here. Feel free to contact me, reach out to me on Slack. I'll monitor that.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place to ask additional questions of our presenters. Again, we've got our Slack channel. And what I'll do is I'll post it again in the chat window in case you aren't there. I hope all of our speakers are on Slack. And if not, I would encourage them to join. You can always reach out to folks there. And then just want to make sure that you folks are aware also our next session is going to be on July 28th. And at this point, I believe it's supposed to be a lean coffee session. So that's what we've got going on. All right. Who else had any questions or thoughts before we wrap up? Before I say my thank yous.
I would just add that if anyone is interested in leading a lean coffee breakout room, let us know.
Yeah, we should do another, we should do a walkthrough sometime soon for the folks who volunteered. Okay, so I definitely want to give my thanks to our speakers tonight. You know, Funby, Chris, Fernando, Andrea, we really appreciate your efforts in putting into this. Marla and Tom and Chris as well, thanks for helping in facilitation. Really appreciate it. And Tom, thanks again for the recording. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. Love to hear feedback. Reach out to me on Slack if you've got any feedback you'd like to hear, like to talk about. And again, I hope everyone has a great evening. Be well.
Thanks, everyone.